show my outrage at the fact that the Australian government, while this heroic, courageous, visionary, insightful journalist Julian Assange has been illegally held in prison, illegally psychologically tortured, and now illegally physically tortured because for no reason other than the fact that through Wikileaks he was able to tell the world what the United States didn't want us to know about what they're doing in their own grubby political world and in other countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria and Libya. We now know, because of Julian Assange and other whistleblowers before him, that the American case for the war against Iraq and Libya and Afghanistan was a pack of lies. We know that because of Julian Assange and courageous whistleblowers from within the United States military and within the United States government, who know that what the United States has been telling the world is a lie, and they've proven to us, they've given us the information to show us that they've been lying to us. Now because the world knows so much more about what the United States is doing, it means that they are not able so easily to make up a pretext to launch another war against another country. Obviously, two countries are in the America's crosshairs is Venezuela and South America. They want to take over Venezuela and steal all their petroleum, and they want to take over Iran for daring to be an independent and sovereign country not under the control of the United States. Now, Julian Assange is an Australian citizen. To report the crimes of the Americans and their allies is not a crime, it's journalism. To speak the truth is not a crime, it's journalism. But in the eyes of the crooked, vile people that are running the United States and their allies, it is a crime for people to speak the truth about their crimes. And that is why they've been trying since 2010 to get their grubby little hands on Julian Assange, and they've done that through subterfuge. With the help of the crooked Swedish government and the London government, they fabricated a charge that Julian Assange had sexually assaulted these two women in Sweden. Julian was quite prepared to go to Sweden to answer those charges, but the Swedish government would not agree to prevent him from being extradited to the United States. So he knew that the Swedish government, in collusion with the United States, was attempting to get him off Swedish soil only so they could ship him off to the United States. In the United States, their plan was to try him in secret before a jury made up exclusively of people in West Virginia who are mostly working for intelligence agents or their siblings. So it is unlikely that this so-called jury would have, hearing his trial in secret, would have paid any attention to the arguments of Julian Assange's defence team, and would take about 30 seconds to pronounce him guilty. Once Julian Assange had been found guilty, their plan was to lock him in jail for 175 years, and in his prison term he'd be confined to a single cell for 23 hours a day, allowed outside only 1 hour a day. He'd be denied any books, any internet, anything. His life would be absolute misery. The people who would be in jail with would be also convicted terrorists and other murderers. The prospect of this was so terrible for Julian Assange that he was clearly thinking of committing suicide rather than allow himself to be locked in jail for 170 years. Now, all this time, for the last 10 years, the Australian government has said almost nothing. It's been ages, weeks, since the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has said a word about Julian Assange. All he has said is, oh, it's going on in England and it's not really our business to interfere with what the British courts are saying. Not a word about the complete travesty of justice that Julian Assange is faced with, the fact that every day he's brought to court, every day he was tried, he was brought to court inside a jail, inside a cage. He couldn't speak to his lawyers, he couldn't pass notes to his lawyers. He was stripped several times and searched each day before he went into court. How is that due process according to Foreign Minister Maurice Payne? He calls that due process. Clearly this Australian government that's supposed to be have a duty of care to Australian citizens doesn't want to know. They're turning their back on Julian Assange and doing nothing. Any government that allows another government, the British government or the American government, to treat any of its citizens who have committed no crimes in this way, doesn't deserve to be in power. And what we have to do is when every member of parliament asks for your vote in the next election, ask that member of parliament, what have they done for Julian Assange for the last 10 years? Whilst this Australian citizen, this innocent Australian who's committed no crime, has been tortured physically and confined illegally and psychologically tortured. What have they done? When have they lifted a finger for Julian Assange? Ask them that question and it would be just amazing if anyone could talk to you with a straight face. What you have to do is you have to vote for candidates who do have a backbone, who do have principle, who are prepared to stand up for Julian Assange. Join those candidates, vote for them, and make sure that everyone that's been sitting in Parliament answers to that. So what we have to do is go on. We're going to continue to hold these vigils every Friday night. We're going to try to reach a larger and larger audience, get more and more people to these vigils, to these protests, make our voice so loud that it's impossible for the Australian government to ignore, for the Australian government to sit on its hands and continue to do nothing for Julian Assange. It's a bloody well time the Australian government acted. If they had a backbone, if they had any decency in them, tomorrow they'd send out a contingent of federal police. They go right into Belmarsh prison. They tell the Belmarsh prison authorities that Julian Assange, an Australian citizen, is held there illegally by the British government. They would demand that the British government immediately reduce and release Julian Assange and come back to Australia. That's what a government with a backbone and decency would do. Yet the Australian government has done nothing. They've barely said a word about Julian Assange these last 10 years. Any word they say is to cast aspersions on Julian Assange. None of these people deserve your vote. None of them deserve to hold office. They should be thrown in the dustbin at the next election. Thank you.
Woo!